Look at your street for a moment. Really look at it. Count the houses. Count the yards. Count the feeders, because if you live in a neighborhood where people love birds, there are probably several within a few hundred feet of your front door. Red feeders, glass feeders, plastic feeders, feeders filled with the same sugar water yours is filled with, yards with the same flowers, trees with the same branches. From above, from the perspective of a ruby-throated hummingbird arriving back from Central America after crossing 900 miles of open ocean, your street probably looks remarkably similar from one yard to the next. And yet, your hummingbird is at your feeder, not your neighbor's, not the yard 3 houses down with the bigger garden, not the yard across the street with the newer feeder and the more expensive flowers. Yours, every single morning. That is not random. That is not luck. That is not because your feeder happened to be the first one the bird spotted when it cleared your roofline after the Gulf crossing. That is a decision, a specific, deliberate, information-based decision that your hummingbird made and keeps making every single day it chooses to be in your yard instead of somewhere else. Today, we are going to find out exactly how that decision was made, what your yard has that the others don't, what you did, probably without knowing it, that put your yard on the list, and what the science says about why, out of every yard on your street, a creature that weighs less than 2 pennies keeps choosing yours. Let us start at the beginning. The very first time your hummingbird saw your yard. It was not this summer. It was not last summer. For most of the hummingbirds that visit established feeders, the first evaluation happened years ago. Possibly the first spring the bird arrived in your area, possibly even before you put out your first feeder. Ruby-throated hummingbirds are scouts before they are settlers. When a bird arrives in a new area, whether it is a young bird establishing its first territory or an experienced bird returning to a familiar region, it does not simply land at the first feeder it sees and declare that home. It surveys. Researchers studying ruby-throated hummingbird territory establishment have documented what they describe as evaluation flights, systematic passes over a defined area where the bird is assessing multiple variables simultaneously. Food availability, threat levels, existing competition, escape routes, perch quality, and increasingly, researchers believe, the behavior of the humans associated with each potential feeding location. Your hummingbird flew over your street. It flew over your neighbor's street. It flew over the yards on both sides of yours and the yards across the road. It looked at everything available, and then it made a list. Not a conscious list, not in the way you make lists, but a neurological ranking of available territories based on a set of criteria that evolution has refined over millions of years of hummingbird survival. Criteria so specific and so sophisticated that the decision your hummingbird made about your yard is not simple and it is not arbitrary. It is the result of an assessment process that most people never knew was happening. So what exactly was your hummingbird evaluating? What does a yard need to make the list? There are 5 primary factors, and I want to go through each one because when you understand them, you will understand not just why your hummingbird chose your yard, but what you have been doing right all along without necessarily knowing it. Factor 1, reliable food. This seems obvious, but reliable is the key word, not abundant. Ruby-throated hummingbirds do not simply seek out the yard with the most nectar. They seek out the yard with the most consistent nectar. There is a critical difference. A yard where the feeder is always full, always clean, always available at predictable intervals teaches the bird something that a yard with an inconsistently maintained feeder never can, that this location can be counted on, that returning here is always worth the energy expenditure, that the food source will not be empty when the bird arrives after burning through its reserves on a cold morning. Consistency is more valuable to a hummingbird than abundance. A feeder that is always half full is more attractive than a feeder that is sometimes overflowing and sometimes empty. If your feeder has been reliable, if you have been the person who refills it before it runs out, who cleans it on a schedule, who puts it back out in spring before the bird even arrives, your yard passed this test. Probably years ago. Factor 2, safety architecture. Every yard has a threat profile. Your hummingbird assessed yours the first time it flew over, and it has been reassessing it on every single visit since. Safety architecture is the physical structure of a yard that determines how safe a small bird can feel while feeding. It includes escape route availability, How quickly can the bird get from the feeder to dense cover if a predator appears? It includes sightline quality. Can the bird see threats approaching from every direction while it feeds? It includes perch availability. Are there suitable spots to rest and survey between feeding bouts? A yard with a feeder positioned in open space with no nearby cover, no clear sight lines, and no quality perch site scores poorly on safety architecture regardless of how good the food is. A yard where the feeder is positioned near protective shrubs or trees, where the bird has clear sight lines in multiple directions, where good perch sites are available, that yard feels safe. And a yard that feels safe is a yard worth returning to. Factor 3, human behavior. This is the factor that most people never think about, and it may be the most important one. Your hummingbird has been evaluating you, not just your yard. You. Research on hummingbird threat assessment shows that individual birds rapidly categorize the humans associated with a feeding location into one of 3 behavioral profiles: threat, neutral, or safe. And the category you fall into has a direct effect on whether your yard makes the list. A threat human moves suddenly near the feeder, reaches toward the bird without warning, brings other people or pets that disturb the feeding area, or behaves unpredictably in ways the bird cannot model. A yard associated with a threat human will be abandoned regardless of food quality. A neutral human is simply ignored, present but not relevant to the bird's decision-making. A safe human is something different. A safe human has a consistent, predictable presence near the feeding area, moves slowly, does not startle, appears at regular intervals the bird can learn to anticipate, maintains the feeder reliably, and, crucially, has been observed by the bird over enough interactions to be classified as trustworthy. If your hummingbird chose your yard, it classified you as safe. That classification was not automatic. It was earned through repeated, consistent behavior over time. You earned it. Factor 4, flower intelligence. Ruby-throated hummingbirds do not just evaluate feeders. They evaluate the entire food landscape of a yard, including its natural nectar sources. A yard with native flowering plants that bloom in sequence through the season, providing natural nectar at different times as different species bloom, is a richer and more stable food environment than a yard that relies entirely on a single feeder. Research on hummingbird foraging behavior shows that birds develop detailed mental maps of flowering sequences within their territories. They know which plants bloom first in spring, which provide the richest midsummer nectar, which sustain them through the late season before migration. If your yard has native flowers, even a small garden of trumpet vine, salvia, bee balm, or cardinal flower, your hummingbird mapped them. It knows their bloom times. It has been exploiting that knowledge all summer. A yard with both a reliable feeder and diverse native flowering plants provides something no single feeder yard can match: a complete food environment. And a complete food environment is worth defending. Factor 5, the invisible factor. This is the one that science is still working to fully understand. And it is the one that most closely touches what many hummingbird owners feel but cannot explain. Some yards just feel right to a hummingbird. Not because of any single measurable factor. The food is good in other yards, the safety is adequate in other yards, the humans are neutral in other yards. But something about a specific yard, a specific combination of elements, a specific quality of presence, draws the bird back repeatedly in a way that goes beyond what the other 4 factors alone can explain. Researchers studying territory fidelity in ruby-throated hummingbirds, why individual birds return to the same specific yard year after year with such extraordinary consistency, have noted that the strongest predictor of long-term return is not food quality alone, not safety alone, not even human behavior alone. It is the combination, the specific combination of all these factors in one place, creating something that registers in the bird's assessment as uniquely valuable, uniquely worth coming back to. Your yard has that combination. That is why it is yours. Now let us talk about the actual moment, the specific visit when your hummingbird moved from evaluation to commitment. You probably did not see it. Most people do not. It looks like any other visit. The bird comes to the feeder, drinks, leaves. But something about that particular visit was different from the ones before it. Something crossed a threshold. Ruby-throated hummingbird territory establishment research describes a behavioral shift that occurs after a sufficient number of positive evaluation visits. a transition from exploratory feeding to what researchers call territorial anchoring. The bird stops treating your yard as one of several options it is rotating through and starts treating it as its yard. The behavioral signs of territorial anchoring are subtle but measurable. The bird begins spending time in your yard between feeding bouts, perching in a favorite spot, surveying the territory, chasing away other hummingbirds that approach the feeder. It begins timing its arrivals to predictable intervals that match the human's feeder maintenance schedule. It begins orienting to the human's presence rather than just the feeder's location. The feeder stops being the center of the territory. You do. This is the shift that most hummingbird owners feel without being able to name it. The moment when the relationship stopped being about a bird visiting a feeder and became about something else. Something harder to define but unmistakably real. Your hummingbird chose your yard as its territory. And in choosing the yard, it chose you as the human associated with that territory. Not the feeder, not the flowers, not the safety architecture. You. Let us go back to your street for a moment. Because understanding why your yard was chosen requires understanding what it was chosen over. Your neighbors have feeders. Some of them have beautiful gardens. Some of them have been feeding hummingbirds for years. And yet, your hummingbird is at your feeder. Why not theirs? The answer is different for every yard your hummingbird evaluated. But the research on territory selection gives us a clear picture of the most common reasons yards get eliminated from consideration. Feeder inconsistency is the most common elimination factor. A yard where the feeder runs empty regularly, where the nectar ferments and is not changed promptly, where the feeder comes down for weeks at a time, that yard teaches the bird that it cannot be relied upon. And unreliable food sources do not anchor territories. Human unpredictability is the second most common factor. A yard where the human moves suddenly, where there are frequent disturbances, children running, dogs loose, people coming and going unpredictably, scores poorly on the safety assessment that determines whether a bird will anchor a territory there. Competition is the third factor. If a particularly dominant male has already established territory over a neighboring yard, your hummingbird may have simply evaluated that territory as not worth contesting. The energy cost of fighting for a location is weighed against the quality of what is being fought for. Your yard avoided these elimination factors. Your feeder was reliable. Your presence was consistent and calm. Your yard was not already dominated by a bird more aggressive than yours. And so it made the list. And then, through repeated positive visits over days and weeks of the first season, it rose to the top. Here is the part that matters most for right now. Because the choice is not made once and permanent. Your hummingbird is making the choice again every single morning. Every time it arrives at your feeder, it is reconfirming what it has always believed about your yard. Every time it perches in its favorite spot and surveys the territory, it is checking that the reasons it chose this place are still true. The choice continues because you continue to earn it. Every clean feeder is a vote for your yard. Every fresh nectar is a confirmation that the reliability the bird learned to expect is still there. Every slow movement near the feeder, every morning you step outside and the bird does not flush but simply watches you from its perch. These are small reaffirmations of a relationship that was built visit by visit over years. And there is something else happening that most people do not know about. Every positive season in your yard increases the probability of return the following spring. Not just because the bird remembers your yard, but because the longer a bird anchors a territory, the stronger its commitment to that specific location becomes. Researchers describe this as site fidelity strengthening, where the pull of a familiar, successful territory grows more powerful with each year of positive experience. Your hummingbird does not just remember your yard. It is increasingly attached to it. Each year that passes, each successful summer in your yard, each safe migration departure, each return to find everything exactly as it should be, adds another layer to a bond that was years in the making. This is not metaphor. This is documented behavioral biology. The bird that has anchored your yard for 3 years is more committed to returning than the bird that found it last summer. The bird that has anchored your yard for 5 years is carrying a pull toward your specific location that goes beyond any other factor in its territory selection. Your yard is not just a yard to your hummingbird anymore. It is home. Here is what I want you to take from this. Somewhere on your street right now, there are yards your hummingbird evaluated and passed over. Yards that had food. Yards that had flowers. Yards where people also love hummingbirds and also fill feeders and also hope the bird will choose them. And your hummingbird flew over all of them. And it came to yours. Not because of luck. Not because of accident. Not because your feeder happened to be visible from the right angle at the right moment. Because your yard passed a test that the others did not. Because your feeder was reliable when reliability mattered. Because your presence was calm and consistent when the bird was deciding whether you could be trusted. Because your yard had something, in the combination of food and safety and human behavior and the invisible quality that researchers cannot fully measure but that hummingbird owners have always felt, that the other yards on your street did not have. You gave your hummingbird something worth choosing, and it chose you. Think about what that means for a moment. A creature that weighs less than 2 pennies. That navigates by stars and magnetic fields. That crosses 900 miles of open ocean twice a year. That carries your yard in its memory through a winter in Central America. That returns not to your street, not to your neighborhood, not to your general area, but to your yard. Your feeder. You. That creature, with all its extraordinary capacity, looked at everything available to it and decided that the best option, the safest, most reliable, most worth returning to option was here. Was you. Every morning your hummingbird arrives at your feeder. Every flash of iridescent green that appears at the glass. Every time you look up and there it is. It is making that choice again. In real time. With full information about every alternative available to it. And it is choosing you. Not by accident. Not by luck. By decision. Tell me in the comments. How long has your hummingbird been coming to your yard? Do you remember the first time you saw it? And do you have a moment when you felt like it truly chose you? Not just the feeder? I want to hear every single story. I will see you in the next one.